Okay, so get ready for this one. We're taking a deep dive into a Christian evangelical devotional text today. I think it might be a little more interesting than you might expect at first. It's from a series called 2025 Uppercut Arise. And the section we're looking at today is called Divine Connection 3. Now, I know that title might sound a little intense, but just stick with us on this one because this section is going to explore a really fascinating idea. And the idea is it connects this idea of finding your place in a community with achieving financial well-being. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept. You know, when we talk about finances, we tend to focus on things like budgeting, investing, and career advancement, right? But this text is taking a totally different approach here. It suggests that our connections with others, what it calls divine connections, can play a crucial role in our overall prosperity.
Yeah, I thought that was super interesting too. So let's kind of break down what the text actually means when it says divine connection.
Well, in the context of this devotional, it's referring to this idea that we're all kind of interconnected as part of a larger spiritual community. It even references a passage from the Bible, Romans 12:4 to 5, which talks about this analogy of a body with many parts. Each part has its own unique function, and they all work together for the good of the whole.
I see. So it's kind of like it's more than just attending church or participating in those religious rituals. It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected
Yeah.
and about actively looking for meaningful connections with other people.
Exactly. And that's kind of where it gets really interesting because this concept of divine connection isn't limited to just religion. You know, it resonates with a lot of secular ideas about building community and social capital. Even sociologists and economists often talk about the importance of having strong social networks for things like moving up economically, being able to access information, and even for your mental and physical well-being.
So you're saying that these divine connections, even if we think of them in a secular way, can actually have real, like tangible benefits, even financial ones.
Yeah, that's what research suggests. And that's what this devotional seems to be pointing at as well. You know, it encourages people to do specific actions to build connections, like visiting someone who's lonely, offering a smile to a stranger, getting involved in community service, things like that.
All those things seem pretty simple.
Mm.
I'm curious, what makes the text think these small acts can have such a big impact?
Well, think about it this way. When you reach out to someone who's feeling isolated, you know you're not just brightening their day, you're potentially opening up a whole new world of support for them. Maybe they meet someone through you that can offer them a job or help them find housing, or just be there to listen to them. And it's not just about the person receiving the kindness either. Studies have actually shown that people who regularly do acts of service and generosity, they actually say they're happier themselves and more satisfied with their lives.
That's interesting. So it's almost like a positive feedback loop. The more you give, the more you get back, even if it's not like a direct one-to-one trade-off.
Exactly. And you know when you're feeling good about yourself and where you fit in, you're more likely to make good financial decisions, to take risks that make sense, and to attract new opportunities. It's not like a magic formula or anything, but there's definitely a connection between positive social engagement and just feeling good overall, and that can definitely impact your finances too.
Okay, so we've talked about this idea of divine connection
Yeah.
and the actions that the text says we should take to actually create those connections. But there's another part of this too, right? Prayer.
Yeah. The devotional includes this list of what it calls key prayers 24. These prayers focus on themes like gratitude, breaking free from oppression, inviting spiritual guidance, and just rejecting poverty and confusion in general.
And even though the prayers don't actually mention finances specifically, I can see how they could be seen as a way to create a positive mindset and look for support when you're dealing with financial challenges.
Absolutely. And I think it's worth pointing out that the author of this devotional, Ghislaine, who goes by Pastor G, he's not just some theologian who's out of touch. He's a husband, a father, an author, a publisher, an interpreter, a mentor, and he's even training to be a nurse.
Wow, that's a lot. It
Yeah.
sounds like he definitely brings a very grounded and practical view to what he's teaching.
Exactly. He leads a French-speaking church in Austin, Minnesota, and they really focus on discipleship and global mission. So this is someone who practices what he preaches.
Okay, so we've got this interesting idea of divine connections and how it could possibly impact not only our spiritual well-being, but also our financial lives. We've looked at some practical things we can do and the prayers that the devotional suggests. So now I want to dig a little deeper into how this all plays out in the real world. What do you think?
I think it's fascinating that the devotional doesn't give you a step-by-step guide to getting rich or anything. It's not like one of those prosperity gospel messages. Instead, it really focuses on the basic principles of connection, service, and community building. It's suggesting that by really focusing on these things in our lives, we can create a more positive and abundant environment where financial well-being is more likely to happen naturally.
So it's not about trying to force the universe to give you riches. It's about creating a supportive environment where you can thrive in every part of your life, including your finances.
Exactly. It's about shifting our thinking from scarcity to abundance, to recognizing the resources and opportunities that are already out there, as long as we open ourselves up to connection and collaboration.
So it's really kind of like a change in mindset.
Yeah, exactly. Like changing how you see the world around you.
And then taking action to connect with others.
Yeah, and to give back to your community.
Okay, so let's talk about some specific examples. Like, how can someone who's maybe not used to thinking this way, how can they actually start to build these divine connections?
Well, I think a good place to start is to think about your own personal experiences. Have you ever had a time when a connection with someone led to something positive in your life? Maybe a new job or a new friendship, or even just a feeling of belonging.
Yeah, I think we all have those kinds of stories.
Right. And those stories can be really powerful reminders that even small connections can make a big difference.
So how can we be more intentional about creating those kinds of connections?
Well, there are lots of ways. It could be as simple as striking up a conversation with someone new, or joining a group or club that interests you, or volunteering your time to a cause you care about.
Okay, so it's about putting ourselves out there
Yeah, exactly. And being open to new possibilities.
and also being willing to give back.
Exactly. It's not just about what we can get from others. It's also about what we can contribute.
And when we focus on giving,
We often find that we receive even more in return.
okay, so this all sounds really great in theory, but let's get down to some practical tips. What are some specific things people can do to start building those divine connections today?
Well, here are a few ideas. First, make a list of people you haven't talked to in a while. Could be old friends, family members, former colleagues, anyone you feel like you've lost touch with.
Yeah, okay.
Then reach out to a few of them, just to say hi and see how they're doing.
And what's the second tip?
The second tip is to think about your interests. What are you passionate about? Are there any groups or clubs in your area that align with those interests?
Okay, so join a group or club.
Yeah, it's a great way to meet people who share your passions.
And the third tip?
The third tip is to volunteer your time. There are so many organizations out there that need help, and volunteering is a great way to give back to your community and meet new people at the same time.
Okay, so those are three really good practical tips. Reach out to old friends, join a group or club, and volunteer your time. What else can people do?
Well, I think it's also important to remember that building these divine connections is not just about external actions. It's also about cultivating a certain mindset.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's about being open to connection,
Yeah.
being willing to be vulnerable, and being grateful for the relationships you already have.
So it's about having a positive attitude.
Exactly. And believing that connection is possible.
And I think it's also about trusting that the universe will provide.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. When we're open to connection, we often find that the right people and opportunities come into our lives at the perfect time.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of divine connections, and we've given some practical tips on how to build those connections. So what's the next step?
Well, the next step is to put these ideas into action.
Right.
Don't just listen to this deep dive and then do nothing. Take some time to reflect on what we've discussed, and then choose one or two things you can do to start building more connections in your life.
And I think it's also important to be patient.
Absolutely. Building relationships takes time, but it's definitely worth the effort.
Okay, so to sum up,
Mm.
if you want to create more abundance in your life,
Mm.
including financial abundance, focus on building those divine connections.
Exactly.
And remember, it's not just about getting, it's also about giving.
Yes. When we give freely, we open ourselves up to receiving even more in return.
Great. Well, that's all the time we have for today, but we'll be back next time to continue our deep dive into Divine Connection 3.
I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. Until then, take care and stay connected.
So yeah, it's kind of like when we're talking about shifting our focus, from scarcity to abundance. It makes me think about how this whole idea of divine connection might work out differently for different people, depending on where they are in their life,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, for someone who's already really involved in their community, it might be less about making new connections and more about, like, deepening the ones they already have.
Exactly. Or maybe it's about finding new ways to use their connections to help others or to support something they really care about.
Yeah, totally. And for someone who's feeling lonely or maybe like they don't quite fit in, this idea of divine connection could be something that really changes things for the better.
Absolutely. It could be as simple as just starting a conversation with a neighbor,
Hmm.
or volunteering at a local soup kitchen, or joining a book club. It's about taking those first steps, to not be isolated anymore and to tap into what the community can offer.
I was reading a study a while back about how being socially isolated can actually make us make worse financial decisions. Apparently, when we feel lonely or disconnected, we're more likely to make impulsive choices or get into debt or even get tricked by scams.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you feel like you're all alone, it's easy to just think about the short term and lose track of your long-term goals. But when you have a supportive community around you, you have people you can go to for advice, encouragement, and even to, keep you accountable.
It's like having a safety net, both emotionally and financially.
Exactly. And on the other hand, there's more and more research showing that there's a strong connection between social capital and being able to move up economically. People with strong social networks tend to have an easier time finding jobs and learning about financial resources, and they're even more likely to find mentors who have already achieved financial success.
So it's not just about feeling good and making better decisions. It's about opening up those doors to new possibilities and resources that you might not even know existed.
Exactly. And I think that's where this idea of divine connection really shines. It encourages us to look beyond our immediate circle and recognize the potential for collaboration and support that's out there in the wider community.
So if someone's listening to this right now and feeling stuck, both financially and maybe even spiritually, where would you say they should start?
That's a great question. I think the first thing to do is to figure out what parts of your life feel like they're missing something. Or where you feel disconnected. Are you feeling isolated? Are you looking for a sense of purpose? Are you struggling to make ends meet? Once you figure out what those areas are, then you can start thinking about small, doable things you can do to address them.
So it's not about trying to change your whole life all at once. It's about taking those little steps
Yeah,
towards having more connection and abundance.
exactly. It could be as simple as calling up an old friend, or joining a local group or club that fits your interests, or even just trying to smile at strangers and start conversations with them.
I think it's also important to remember that building these divine connections isn't just about what we do on the outside. It's also about what's going on inside us.
Absolutely. Things like prayer, meditation, and writing down what you're grateful for can be really powerful ways to shift your focus from what you don't have to what you do have,
It's about recognizing the abundance that's already there
inside of us and all around us.
and then doing something with that.
Yeah, like taking action
Mm.
to share that abundance with other people. It's kind of funny, isn't it? How this devotional text, which could easily just focus on spiritual stuff, actually gives us some really useful insights into how to do better financially.
It definitely makes us rethink how we usually see faith and finances.
Yeah.
It's not about praying to win the lottery. It's about actually getting involved in our communities
Yeah.
and being generous and helpful.
And what's even more interesting is that this message works even if you're not religious. The ideas of connection, working together, and giving back, those are things everyone can understand and use.
So if we had to boil down this whole deep dive into one thing that our listeners can actually do, what would it be?
That's a tough one. But I think it would be this. Don't underestimate how powerful connections can be,
Right.
whether it's through your church, a volunteer group, a hobby club, or just talking to your friends and family. Make an effort to build meaningful relationships in your life. You never know how those connections might affect your well-being, both financially and in every other way.
It's kind of wild, right?
Uh-huh.
We always try to keep all these parts of our lives separate, like faith, money, our community, and personal growth. But this whole deep dive has really shown me how connected they all are.
Yeah, it really has. And it makes me think about something we talked about before, that word oppression that the devotional text uses to talk about financial struggles. That really stuck with me.
Yeah, me too. It's not a word you hear every day when you're talking about money, but it adds a whole new dimension to the conversation.
Right. It's like it's suggesting that there's something we can actually do to break free from those money problems. It's not just about accepting where we are. It's about looking for ways to become empowered and make a change.
And that's where those divine connections come in, right? It's not just about praying for a sudden pile of cash. It's about tapping into all the wisdom, resources, and support that a community can offer.
Exactly. It's realizing that we don't have to do this alone. There are people out there who've been through the same stuff, who've learned valuable lessons, and who are actually willing to help.
Like that saying, it takes a village. We're not supposed to deal with all of life's craziness by ourselves.
I think that's a major takeaway from this deep dive. It doesn't matter if you're religious or not. This idea that we're all connected, it's true. We all need each other. And when we open ourselves up to those divine connections, whether we see them in a spiritual way or a more everyday way, we create opportunities for growth, support, and yeah, even for our finances to improve.
So if we had to sum up everything we've explored today in a way that our listener could actually use in their own life, what would you say?
I'd say this. Be intentional about building connections. Make an effort to reach out to other people, to offer your help, and to ask for guidance when you need it. You never know what doors might open, what resources might pop up, or what unexpected good things might come your way when you embrace the power of community.
I love that. This deep dive has been such a fascinating journey, and it really shows that even a short devotional text can give us some pretty profound insights. So to everyone listening, we encourage you to think about these ideas. Explore the divine connections in your own life and see where they take you. Who knows? Maybe you'll find your own path to financial well-being and a richer, more fulfilling life along the way.